Okay, now we're on.
All right.
Ooh. So, how do we want to start this thing?
Well, let's see. What are the topics that we're discussing today?
Well, you wanted to start. Well, we wanted to start off with abortion, right? So we might as well just go straight into that one.
Okay. Is anyone here pro-abortion?
I am.
Pro? Okay.
Bro, I don't care. I guess
All right. So you're indifferent.
I'm indifferent, and I feel like either way for my choice would be just my choice. It wouldn't be like, oh, I believe this. Everybody else should too. You know, that kind of thing.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm more of the same vein where I don't oppose it on a definition. However, I'm completely opposed to the current rationale that's used to justify abortion. I think it's wrong and quite barbaric, if anything. And so while I don't agree with the positions or with the reasons for the position, at times I would not be opposed to certain women having abortions, for example.
And I know I get people's total. I understand the whole argument about like the whole baby killing thing. I'm just curious as to how far like people would take it. Like the question I was gonna ask specifically was like, how do you feel like? Because most of the times people would have abortions is either because they don't want it, so they'd probably neglect the child if they did, or they can't afford it, right? Or the child would be really poor, terribly off, right? Is that most of the reasons?
Yeah, that
Correct.
and probably like
I would
health
assume
issues.
so.
Yeah, and then probably relationship issues, right? Like, oh, we're not ready for this, that kind of thing. So, is it? I know no, I'm people that are against abortion. I'm sure wouldn't argue this, but is it worth having a shitty, complicated life, or not being well off, struggling over the abortion for both sides, parents and that child?
Correct. Well,
Oh, cool. It would be. You're saying then?
no, 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 I'm just it's a good question. Like, correct. That is one of the things that we have to debate or at least discuss is will the parent's life be shitty if the child is born? You would have to go case by case. Um, I would assume in the majority of cases their life would not be shitty, to be honest. I think that there would certainly be some people who could not support it, etc. But that is not the vast majority of people. I'd be willing to venture. And if you say that their lives will be shitty, I would have the question: would their child's lives be shitty? If the parent's life is automatically shitty because of having the child, would the child's life therefore be shitty, right?
It
Because
would probably
the
suffer.
parent knows that their life was not shitty before the child was born, correct? Or at least not
Yeah,
as awful. And so therefore they might even blame their own child for having
exactly.
their life go down for. However, that doesn't mean that while the child is being blamed, that does not mean that the child is to be blamed, right?
Oh no, it's not.
Because there was
A
nothing.
lot, but a lot of people are gonna totally project that on their kids at some point, unless they're trying. Some of them. I feel like a lot of people that wanted to have the abortion let that know. And don't you think that's gonna slowly leak out to them?
I mean, what would
Because I
what would you define
what?
as shitty? What is shitty?
Yeah, that is very.
Okay, so I feel like shitty is either being like poor,
Huh?
not having the means, barely making ends meet. The kids are like hungry, that kind of thing. Not like, oh, you can make it, and they're eating fast food all the time, that kind of thing. I'm talking like barely making it. Because most of these abortions happen like at probably college, right? Like kids that fuck up and they don't protect themselves that well.
Yeah, I mean that it really comes down to the basis of one of my questions is just because your life will be awful, does that mean that you should be safeguarded from having made an awful choice? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. That's my question. Is that worth like is because then I was gonna say the other factor aside from being, not being able to afford the case, is negligence from the parent. But then anybody that wants an abortion could just threaten that they're going to be negligent towards their child, and then like what's going to
Correct.
happen there? People are just going to abuse the system that way.
Correct. Correct. And I guess one of the other questions that you have to have is if no one can have abortions, obviously, let's not pretend to be sub 90 IQ people here. Just because you make something illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or won't happen,
The
right?
black market
You'll
abortion.
you'll have the black market. And so if you care about people's health, at least for the woman's health, you will know that abortions will keep going on if they are legal or not, correct? There will be some women who will have it regardless. However, we have to ask the question, just because it is illegal, you have to go through much more extreme measures, right? And so some women might say, look, if I get pregnant, I will have I will not be able to have the child. Therefore, I will need to have an abortion. However, getting an abortion on the black market will be extremely pricey
Expensive.
and et cetera, et cetera. And so, therefore, I cannot pursue that avenue. So, what is your recourse? You will abstain, right? You'll have to
You
be
have
much.
to.
Yeah, exactly. And I really don't see a problem with that, to be honest. Right? What's the best way to fix a broken leg? Sure, you can have surgery, but another great way is to just never have the broken leg in the first place. And while that may seem like you're dodging the issue, there's nothing to say that you need to have sex while young, right? You need to have sex while you cannot have a child,
Well,
while you don't have the means to support the
so do
child.
so do you think that if, let's just say, there was an all right ban on abortions, right? Just like boom, tomorrow there's no more abortions allowed.
Correct.
It's
They
illegal.
would be far less happening. Not just
You think so?
not just because obviously it's not legal, right? But the means to access it have become much more strict and impending, and
But
so
do you think
people.
that would make more people responsible in that sense?
I mean, I certainly believe so.
I feel like
You're
when it
free
comes
to
to,
disagree.
I feel like when it comes to sex, people are still gonna fuck up the same number.
I think
It's not
so for
like
sure. I think they were.
you think
They're still
they
gonna
would
have
still
sex
have the same.
regardless.
Yeah,
You can have sex. You can have sex with a condom or with a pill, etc. Right?
oh yeah, I
I
get
mean, it's
that,
not
but I
it's not
mean,
a
like,
100% guarantee. I'm just
of
saying that
course.
I do think that society as a whole would actually become much more responsible, right? If you have to go to this vast, extreme, and illegal measure to get rid of your problem, you're gonna have to say, I can't get rid of the problem, but I have to go down into hell and back, right, to get rid of it. So, should I really go through all of the risk right now, right? I'm not saying never have sex, right? But is there
Oh yeah, I
really a
get it.
reason, right? If you look at the abortion rates and the age
I don't even know
brackets,
what they are.
no, like the age brackets and like the abortion rates for the age brackets, the majority of abortions happen with women who are 16 through 24, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
And so you're just wondering like, okay, why does a 16-year-old need to have sex, right? Why does a 17-year-old? Why does a 19-year-old?
Well, it's not even just about why do they have unprotected sex.
Correct, correct. Why did you need to go down that path? And you'd ask, well, is it because they're going down that path because they know that they can relatively easily get, quote unquote, rid of their problem, right?
I don't
If
know.
if
Which
you
That's a
if
tough one.
if if you know that if you rob a bank, you can actually get off with a lesser sentence, right? Let's say if you rob a bank, you actually get 25 years federal time. Let's say if you rob a bank, however, and you plead guilty and
yeah,
and you say that you will do volunteer service, you actually only end up doing 2 years,
was it
right?
that cut that short?
It's just a hypothetical here.
Oh, okay. I
This
know
this
it
this
gets
doesn't
cut a little
exist.
short,
Yeah,
but
this doesn't exist. The exact measurements that I'm giving you. I'm
okay.
just saying, right? If you know that you have a problem, but if you do X path, you can reduce the problem, or at least not even have the problem in the first place.
Yeah,
Obviously, people are going to say, "Oh, okay, I don't really need to be as careful, right? Because you have another avenue."
yeah. And so I get where you're going with
And
the
so
relation.
yeah, purely based on offering the options, we already have like diverging paths, right? Where I'm not saying for one path or another. I believe one personally, but I don't believe one for everyone. I'm just saying that if you certainly believe that, let's say they should be legal across the board, you at least have to address the argument, right? That you're making it much easier and the ramifications of making it much easier for everyone, right? Because well, let's say I certainly don't have a problem with a 26-year-old mother, right, who says, actually, I'm working in a law firm and I don't want to have a child to jeopardize my career. I'd rather prefer working.
Yeah.
I would say, okay, sure, right? But then you might get cases where the 17-year-old girl from Texas is pregnant, right? And you're saying, okay, why did you have unprotected sex? Is it because you're young and foolish? Is it a mix of that and the fact that you knew that there was a very easy and legal, solution to your problem?
Well, there's
And
definitely
I
going to be the argument that, well, one, sex is sex, like a lot of people want it, and then two, they're going to argue the whole thing with condoms being shitty.
Sure. I mean, if it's shitty, but it protects you from, supposedly jeopardizing your entire life,
Yeah.
career, and having you a shitty life in general, I guess you should be able to sacrifice, some sensual pleasure for the while. That'd be my argument, at least.
Pull out game week. But
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, and that's not even getting into the big issue, which is it a life that you're killing?
Yeah, but I feel like that's going to go back and forth, with
Sure, sure.
anybody.
I'm just going to summarize this one rather briefly. I think that if we go by the scientific objective standards that would qualify what we find as life on another planet, right?
Mm.
We should use those very same standards for determining life within someone else, right? Because how can you have such radically different standards for life that, let's say we find some cells on the moon. You would say like, oh my God, we found life. We found this old egg of a
Yeah, it's old.
female alien, and there's actually like growing cells inside of it, and we can see that pretty soon that it's gonna hatch or whatever, it's gonna be birthed. If we apply the abortion argument, you would say actually it's not a life until 6 months, or it's not a life until it's even fully birthed. You start getting these really weird things where, oh, I know that scientifically this alien thing is a life, even though it's just a couple protozoa flying around here in a cell. However, this 3-month-old or 2-month-old thing inside of you is not a life.
I think it goes to the point that, well, at least I think that when does they define life or human life as when does when do you become you or your conscious? Like when human mind and to yes, not develop because it's already kind of developed, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's basically
Ah, but
when
but
is it
but
a
that is
human? I guess not just a
I
cluster
ah
of
see, that's a
cells.
different problem though. That's a different problem though. You're saying when is it a human? I was very specific. I said what is a life?
Yeah, see, that's where people are gonna find two different things because I feel
Yeah,
like people aren't gonna argue that it's not alive. They're gonna argue that it's never had an experience, and so it hasn't done anything yet. It hasn't even been out the womb. It probably sees like super dark red if its eyes are even open.
Sure, sure. And well, you might be particularly right in the fact that it has no experiences and maybe it is not a fully functioning human. However, is it a life?
I mean, I would say yes.
I mean, not just you would say yes, but if you're going by actual biological scientific standards,
Yeah.
you have to say yes, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, that's very important to establish. It is a life.
Yes.
However, so what? There are plenty of people who are alive and not just, 4-month-old fetuses inside of the mother's womb, but actually 37-year-old males fully birthed from out of the womb and having lived on our planet who are disgusting people and who are put to death by the state, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, some things are alive and are killed, but at
Yeah.
least,
But
for the sake of the argument, don't give me this pathetic straw man where it's not a life, but scientific standards say it is alive, and therefore XXYZZ. It's okay, just be honest intellectually and say it's alive. However, I cannot sustain this life for blah 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 blah. You see,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
it's gonna completely change this path.
Just like we say, yeah, you are a fully birthed life, not just a life, but a human, and a human who has had 37 years of experience on the planet. However, you are a disgusting person, and therefore you deserve the death penalty, right?
Yeah,
I'm not opposed to the death penalty in this case, right? For someone who, I don't know, he just goes about on a murder rampage and kills toddlers, right? A lot of people in that case would say, okay, sure, I support his loss of life, right?
yeah.
Suddenly everyone is now, oh, okay, that's okay in this case. Let's just
No,
be somewhat intellectually honest and say, yeah, this is a life, but XYZ.
yeah, so to push it further and kind of circle back to like what we were saying in the beginning, is the abortion worth it for a parent that's going to end up not being able to support it very well?
Correct.
You think yes, or you're saying we should go down that path?
We'll,
Say correct.
we'll explore that path, right?
Okay.
But at least we got to that path
Oh no,
in an
yeah,
honest fashion, right? We're
yeah.
saying, yes, it's a life, however, blah, blah, blah. Because the problem is that today in the discourse, we just hear, it's not a life, right?
And it's
Therefore,
my body, my choice.
Yeah.
correct. It's
It's
my body,
mine.
my choice. Correct. However, you are also dealing with another body within your body.
Yeah.
And while you are saying that your body is your property, well, therefore, you're actually in favor of slavery because slaves are on their master's property. If we go back to the Civil War, slaves are on their master's property. Therefore, how can the government or anyone tell them what to do with people on their property? Correct? It's the
Yeah.
exact same argument. So let's at least be somewhat intellectually honest and say, yes, those people are on your property, however, they are also alive, therefore, XYZ, right? Both arguments in favor of slavery and in favor of abortion with the current discourse are wrong. And because they're
So
dishonest, they're being dishonest intellectually too for really awful reasons,
yeah,
right?
they're like reflecting a different avenue to try to make themselves
Correct. And so I don't mind if you get to the end, the goal, the line of abortion fine, right? But
just
it
say
really is
the
about the
real
matter of
reason
how
why.
you get there.
Yeah, like oh, I can't afford it, or oh,
Yeah,
this
exactly,
is
right. And I'm not opposed to in any case if you say that, yeah, actually I work two jobs and I can't even take off time from one job because I want to be able to pay rent or etc.,
and then I'd have to afford a nanny, and that's gonna be money out of my pocket on
You,
top of
you
the
would
work
just
that
say
I'm
that
working.
you can't even afford a nanny,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And it really is in accordance to that. Uh, it really is important to say that you can't afford as opposed to you don't want to, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
it
Because if you're saying
it,
you don't
it
want to, then you're just being
it's just an inconvenience to you, and I don't think we should go down that avenue at all,
Oh yeah.
right?
yeah.
That you're
That's
saying,
super
oh, this
vague.
would inconvenience me, so I'm going, you know,
That could be abused so
that
much.
might be abused in some cases. So it might be difficult to to obviously weigh them with a woman's career, where this child would inconvenience my career.
So
It really is tough. I don't have a solid answer for that area.
now let's just say they couldn't afford it. Right? It's very clear they can't afford it. They're barely making ends meet amongst the couple themselves. Right?
Okay.
Well, oh my god, I'm blanking. So like, let's just say they become, an orphan and they go into foster homes and stuff like that. Would that be the case, you think, or it would just be okay? That's fine. Abortion is it?
Well, first we have to say, okay, let's say abortions are fine and the couple cannot afford the child. You then have to say, okay, can they pay the abortion fee? Can they pay the medical expenses?
How much are those on average anyway?
Let me do a quick search for that.
Yeah,
I
good.
don't know.
I have no idea.
I would imagine it differs per state. Let's see the
Three
financial
hundred
to 800.
800.
That's not that bad to be honest.
I thought it was a
Because if
lot worse.
yeah, if you think about it, that actually gives you a
Yeah.
lot of time.
And 300 and 800 up front is a lot better than
Several thousand or something.
yeah, for the lifestyle, yeah, for the whole life of the child.
Correct. I don't think that we should be subsidizing in any way a federal program either to pay for abortions.
That would that would be rampant. That would cause so many problems. So that budget would like increase by the year because people are going to start finding out that you can, and then they're just going to keep
Correct,
fucking
correct.
doing
And
it.
because therefore you also say that, oh, if you don't want this child, it would inconvenience you, you can use all of this federal money, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But then you do get, of course, to the tricky case where you kind of box some people in prison, and you say, okay, you cannot pay the child, you cannot pay to have the child. Can they pay for the abortion? What would you do if they cannot have the child? And for whatever reason, I don't think it's actually very applicable, this one, but I think we should just argue the points regardless. What if they cannot afford the abortion either?
If they can't afford the abortion, yeah. Well, what path does that lead them? It's probably going to end up being an abandoned child.
Sure, an abandoned child. Is that so bad, however? Obviously,
Um, I've
because it's
heard
not
that
because it's not
the foster care system is pretty
Yeah,
horrible.
it's pretty shit.
correct. It's pretty shitty.
And then I know people are gonna argue, well, like, well, what if that kid was the next XYZ? But then, like, there's so many other kids that you're leaving out here. You know,
I mean,
yeah. I mean,
I don't think that the federal adoption system and those kinds of things are great either. The hilarious thing is that private and individual adoptions have such great success stories, right? Where they adopt children from, you just not even American children, but just adopting third world children from other countries, right? And
okay, I feel like is that a little skewed though, in the fact that it's just showing like the
well,
good outcomes. Like, what about all the other? I feel like there's a bunch more. It's like 90% not, 10% shown at least, or at most.
in regards to individual adoptions, or
Yeah, like success rate.
I mean, obviously not everyone's going to be a success, right? Nor does everyone deserve to be a success
Of
either.
course.
But obviously, there are some people who do not want the child, and there are many people who, as well, who want the child, right?
Hmm.
And let's say that they simply do not want to have the long pregnancy period, right? It would endanger their body, or some people are infertile, etc. I think that there could be like some kind of a program set up, right, for individuals, not federal either, but for individuals where you say like, here's my problem. My wife and I cannot have a child, but we want a child, and where people say that my wife and I have a child in her stomach, however we
Hmm.
cannot support the child, and so those two couples,
They
individually
finally
hash
agree.
out the details of some kind of an exchange, right? And that's
Yeah.
not really different from what goes on right now in individual adoptions as well.
Yeah, I can see that. That would be nice.
Right? And
Yeah.
there's nothing to stop people from as well from opening up private and individual, foundations, etc. for abortions, right? It's
Yeah.
just
Aren't the like on the flip side, isn't like what do you call those sperm banks? Aren't those like non-government? Those are all private as well, right?
mhm,
Yeah, I figured. So like this would be like a similar thing, a private industry where
correct.
yeah.
And so, nothing's wrong with that kind of a system.
Do you think it would work though? I mean, because I feel like most if a woman goes through, I mean, they're far likely to put the kid up for adoption if they go through the entire 9 months. I feel like they would get attached, and they really wouldn't want to give up their
Oh yeah, and
kid.
that really goes down to another issue completely, which is at the time they say that they cannot, financially support or whatever the child, right? Because
Hmm.
they're very much thinking in the fact of, well, Friday night I go bowling, and Saturday I do X Y Z Z Z, right? Whereas the longer that they carry the child, there is a bond that forms, and they say that, okay, I will have to restructure my life, however, I can do this, right? And that really comes down to the problem that I was stressing earlier, is when you make it so easy to just get rid of the problem instantly, people just say, oh, I can't actually handle this problem on myself.
So do
But
you,
in many cases, they could have.
So
Does that make sense?
yeah. So do you think there should be like a screening process then for every case? You know, depending on year old that I don't know got raped or something like that, versus someone that is 22 and they kind of just feel like it'd be a burden.
Well, obviously, yeah, there should be some kind of a screening issue. I'm not really sure how to set something up like that up. Um, I also don't think you should talk about rape in general, to be honest, because that's such an extreme outlier, and it's used as a pathetic straw man where, oh, you're against abortion, well, therefore, you want a woman to have a child
Those are
that was
special
raped.
case
Like,
scenarios.
okay, we're not really talking about the 0.05% of
Yeah,
scenarios,
yeah,
right? So, well, that is certainly a very good topic and issue to talk about. I think when we're talking about the vast majority of pregnancies, let's please not go to such extremes as that one when discussing general theories and merits.
no, yeah, it makes sense, but I know that's an argument that people have.
Sure, sure. I'm just saying, like, let's compare it to the 16-year-old girl who she had sex for the first time with her boyfriend and she got pregnant, as opposed to the 24-year-old college graduate who it would inconvenience her,
Okay,
right?
so what about like that 16-year-old that just messed up versus a 22-year-old that just graduated and has the potential to raise this kid, but feels like detrimental to her career or whatever that she wants. Um, but wouldn't that basically be the same argument that 16-year-old would have? Because I mean, she say that by being 16 and she's having a kid now, it's gonna be much more difficult for her to basically
Well,
school
sure.
and
I
all
mean,
that
I mean,
stuff.
I feel that the 16-year-old has much more in her favor than the 24-year-old, right? Because the 16-year-old says that, right, she goes to school, she doesn't have a job. If she had a job, well, she certainly is going to have to quit the job to take care of the child from early on, right? And so she has a lot more going in her favor of the argument why she should have an abortion than the 24-year-old who says, "Oh, I just graduated recently and I really like my job and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." I really feel that those issues are somewhat valid, but they really do pale in comparison to the
Okay,
16-year-olds.
I can see how like they would have a stronger argument, but how do you measure success over, let's call it, the
Potential
life
or
of
something.
yeah?
That's a good question. I'm not really
Because I
sure.
mean,
I don't really
I
have an
know
answer.
I would agree with that case where it's like, oh, I'm 20 29. I've got this business going, for example, it's very successful, yada yada. This baby would put me out of the business basically, right?
Sure.
But somebody's gonna argue with like, oh
That's
well,
just
I
an
mean,
inconvenience to you.
exactly. So why is it more of an inconvenience for you than this recently graduated student who doesn't have a job and definitely doesn't have the money to afford it because they just graduated, they got student debt, et
Correct,
cetera, et
correct. And
cetera.
so while it may inconvenience you, you at least have the funds.
Exactly.
I'm not really sure what kind of a measuring system you would have to have for that, to be honest.
Yeah,
Which is part of the reason why as well is, I mean, barring the rare exceptions, I do think that it should be very, very hard to have an abortion, right? Not just because of the fact that you
so it
start.
should be strict.
Oh yeah, because if you make it so lax, you do have to deal with all of these issues, and I don't think that there really is a clear answer for for the situation that you brought up, where the 24-year-old recent graduate and the 29-year-old businesswoman, right? I don't think that there really is a great and clear distinction. I don't think in any world there can or will be, and so therefore I think that it's not really the job of it's not really the role to arguate and regulate in that kind of an area. Therefore, we should just wholly ignore, or at least not include these kinds of arguments, right? Which is why if you make it very strict and very demanding, you won't really have to deal with those kinds of things, right? Because I would
Yeah.
argue in both cases, there are inconveniences to both the 24-year-old and the 29-year-old,
Yeah.
just in very different cases, right? And so, sure, okay, you're 15 years old and you were raped. Okay, that's fine. Abortion is fine.
There was never intent to have the child. It was definitely not in sexually consented, et cetera, et cetera.
However, That's very, very different from the 24 and 29-year-old. And
Yeah,
you know, you really,
24 and 29-year-old a lot closer in scenario.
yeah, I mean, you really do have to be careful with how you formulate your terms and define them.
This is gonna eventually it's gonna lead down. Oh well, this is discrimination against younger people who fucked up or something like that. If that was
Sh-
the case, if they favored like those people, and then like, oh well, I'm 29, I have a business, need to
sure.
run it, you
And
know.
and you have to be very careful with even those strict ones that I said right now, or let's say no abortions except for in cases where the mother's life would be endangered by having the child, or it was raped. You'll have a lot of cases, therefore, where people just lie, right?
Yeah,
People will lie and say that they were raped. Um, for that one, I'm not really sure how to solve the problem. I mean, you would have to. I would
well, you
assume that
definitely have
I
to
would
prove
assume that
it.
forensic analysis would actually be able to see, were you raped or
Raped
not.
kids and stuff like that.
I would assume, to apply for this kind of a process, you'd have to go through the check marks of the rape kit, etc. But yeah, I mean, you will get people who will want to cheat the system, and they say that, oh, my boyfriend raped me, and well, that certainly is true. Your boyfriend actually can rape you. Um, in a lot of cases, probably it was just a fib. It might just
Yeah,
be a fib.
especially since there's been many people that have tried to gyp the system. It's now up for grabs, and people are gonna start doubting those who are actually raped. It ruins it for everybody else, but that's society. That's why we have speed limits and education standards and everything.
Sure, but as you saw, I wasn't really necessarily opposed to
Oh no, no,
having someone killed. It's just I think that the logic and the rationale should at least be somewhat intellectually honest, right?
yeah, the reasoning behind it should be fair instead of just, oh, it's me, it's my choice, it's mine, that's it, done.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the problems too, as well, is I don't have a solution for this one either, but I think it's a valid point. Is where does the father come into this?
Oh yeah, that too. Like
So
if
obvi-
the father
obvious,
doesn't want it and the mother does,
so
yeah,
obviously,
that's
in cases of rape, the father's literally raped her, and obviously, no rapist just sticks around and says, "I raped this woman, but please let me
that's
have the
my kid.
child." Yeah,
Yeah,
like they're not that dumb. They're not that dumb, right? So, in the woman, that one is just the woman, so obviously she has the full sway. But what do you say if a couple, 29-year-old, the businesswoman, they got pregnant. The businesswoman says, I don't want to have the child and jeopardize the business. And the father says, I do want to have the child, right?
yeah.
I don't have a clear answer for that one, but I'd be interested to hear what both of you say.
I mean, it's definitely case by case, I'd say, but it's gonna be hard to find an agreement when the mother is for the father that wants it and the mother that does not, because those the mother still has to do all the work essentially, right? Women do most of the work for birth. That's obvious. Nobody's gonna negate that. So either it'd have to be monetary, but then it wouldn't be fair for the other way, where if the father doesn't want it and the mother does, what happens in that case?
Correct.
The only rationale I'd have for it is monetary, paying for it to happen, having a contract agreement. That'd be a completely like separate business, Oh, but paternity, parents, whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah, but for the father that wants it and the mother does not. I'm sorry, for the mother that wants it and the father does not. I feel like that would probably be another split case where the mother would solo do it, and then the father cannot have any say with the child anymore. That would be the agreement, I think.
Fair enough.
I think it would take forever. You would have to
Oh yeah, it'd
have
be like a divorce
yeah,
case, right?
yeah, exactly. You would have to have like a trial, and then by the time that thing's it's gonna be like 2 years old.
Yeah,
That is true, but if we go by the current argument where my body, my choice, well, the thing that inseminated the woman and got her pregnant was the male sperm, which is part of his body, right? And so in many cases, as well as just is your body. However, what is inside of you is literally half of your body and half of the male's body, right?
Fuck, that's
Your
complicated.
genetic composition is 50-50.
It is 50-50, but even
S-
with that case, I'm gonna say
Sure, I'm
you would
just
have to agree on something in the end anyway.
sure. I'm just saying that by the current standards and
Oh
logic
yeah,
of my
yeah.
body, my choice, well,
It's all the women.
yeah, well, it technically speaking, it is literally half of your body and half of the male's body, right? And
Yeah,
yet it is 100% your choice, right?
yeah.
I'm not saying it should be completely 50% the male's choice, but at least some percentage, some sway, right? Because right now it's literally a monopoly of the mother.
Hello. Kind of cut. You're starting to cut out a little bit,
Oh,
but yeah.
it's a
Um,
monopoly of the mother, right? She
and
says,
that's an issue with like today's society. You have all these rich men who are like where there's those bunch of women who try to have sex with them and try to have a kid and then keep them locked down. You never see it the other way around, or you almost never see it the other way around, right? I have actually don't know
where a
much of like.
rich woman tries to get a man and keep him down.
Well, yeah, it doesn't work that way because it's the woman that ends up having the baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then what? It's not until the baby is born that you can do a paternity test, right?
Not a medical person, but I would assume that let's go by that standard. I don't see how you can tell in the
Yeah,
womb
but
safely.
yeah, exact. So then you've locked this person down at least for let's say 10 months because I know it's not a very fast process. 9 months for the birth, pregnancy, and then being born, and then doing the test. So like this person can't just run away. Yeah, but obviously you don't really see that the other way around. At least I don't. It's not in the news. Definitely not as significant. Yeah. Um. Sorry, did I sidetrack this?
No, no, that was fine.
Oh, okay. But I mean, in terms of agreement between the two parties, it'd have to just be. It almost looks like a divorce case.
Yeah, that
What
is.
if obviously because this is the case, if both of them want it, there's no case there, right?
Yeah.
And if and if both of them don't want it, the grounds for abortion essentially, right? Unless they don't believe in that, then putting it up for adoption, so on and so forth. The only two cases is mother wants it, father doesn't. Father wants it, mother doesn't. But in both of those cases, mother seems to trump the whole thing because there's no middleman ground. There's no financial substitution or any sort of agreement between the two parties to just let one be whatever. Father, okay, fine, you'll pay me, I'll have the baby, you keep it. Yeah. And then there's gonna be that whole thing like Leo brought up where there's that, what is it, it's a chemical thing, right, where eventually the mother is gonna feel attached to the baby.
Yeah, pretty much where they kind of just want to keep it. I feel like most people, how they say, oh, just put your kid up for adoption type of thing.
Yeah, and
I
then
mean,
once they have it.
yeah, they usually just keep it. I think, or at least to the majority of women would do that.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think that's like a really complicated issue to be honest, because then you have to
I'm
get
sure
into
that's why it's still an issue.
yeah, exactly, because you have to get on like all the legal stuff on top of moral stuff. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you're
You at
gonna
least
have.
have to somewhat address the case, obviously, where you know, the moment you hear you're pregnant, you there's this rubber band reaction where, I can't have it. I don't want the child. But as time goes on, and if you have the child, you actually know that your first initial reaction was was an overreaction, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was gonna hop on that. It's like it's usually never. People will get very emotional, and then emotions trump the logical
Yeah,
sense of having the child, and then
correct. And so if you made it so easy that she's just like, "Oh my God, I'm pregnant," and she just walks around the corner to the Circle K, if it's so accessible and so easy to the Circle K of abortions, and she has it, the truth is that maybe she could have had it, right? It was
yeah,
just this instant rubber band reaction, and I mean, she literally ended a life in a very short span of time on an emotional decision, right? It's okay to end it
Which is
after a long time and a logical decision, right? But obviously, for humans, usually emotion comes first and then logic, right?
Now, when does that attachment thing kick in? Because I know I've heard a lot of cases where in states that are usually against abortion but still have a few clinics where the doctors will send their patients home and tell them to think about it.
Hmm.
And then I don't know if that is supposed to influence them or like hit that point where they're like start becoming attached to it.
yeah,
You know, trying to change their mind essentially. You know.
yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's probably just kind of what Adrian said. The whole rubber band thing, where they're probably freaking out at first, and they're like their emotions high, and I think the doctor just tells them that for them to down and think it more logically, I guess, and most of the
I mean,
time they no, no, I wouldn't say most of the time, but a good majority of the time, I think they're capable of taking care of the kid. And financially, they just have to um, said change their lifestyle for that kid. That's what I think some people
And most people don't want to change.
I remember reading in a study that after babies are born, they're infants. Mothers can already identify their infant from other infants based on smell alone,
crazy.
right? And not just that, but the infant itself, when they're exposed to breast milk of the mother, different breast milk smells differently based on each mother's genetic composition. When the babies are exposed to their mother's breast milk, their cortisol or some kind of stress indicators in their body go down, and so this baby, just because it wasn't outside of the body yet, there's literally an umbilical cord, and so the baby has on some level already connected with you, right,
Yeah,
as a mother, and it literally knows your body presence, and by being near you, or at least it thinks it's near you because of your breast milk, it's already getting relaxed and less stressed. And so I think I'm not a student of medicine or any kind, but I would assume that it probably starts in the womb before the baby is even born. That
The
the
attachment.
connection already happened. Oh yeah.
oh yeah, for sure.
I don't know myself either. Now, what would you? So that what is? I mean, this is just like generic questioning amongst people that I've gone to school with and at work. Most women, not right now.
Oh, okay, bye.
Sorry. Um. Most women, this is slightly different, but it's about having a child. Will would say the age that they want to have a child by like 90% of them say they want to have a child like 5 to 10 years younger than what men say. What would you say about that?
I'm
Like
confused. So
like so
if
like
the
the
main
average the average man that says they want to have a child that I've asked personally, this is just personal stuff, and from college, and like college age people say they want to have a child later on 29, 30,
that's
31.
what
Women's
men say.
yes, and then women say they would like to have a child pretty much sooner. It's like 22, 23, 24, 25.
I think
Okay.
because their
Is that
ovaries
societal
train.
or is that
I
biological?
think it's probably both. I think because they're told that. I think it's after 30 or something like that. I can't remember what it is. They have a really high chance of having their kid Down syndrome. Like their body's kind of telling them like, "Hey, have kid for this age." But yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. It could be a mixture of both. I think.
I would argue that it's yeah, it is both. I think the Canadian psychology professor Jordan Peterson actually talked about this, where he said that women are expected to have their life in order 5 years before men, right?
Yeah.
Because of biological constraints, right? So they need to have their career and options planned out, right? And they also need to at least be somewhat started on the path for family, right? Whereas males, I'm pretty sure, like Hugh Hefner could have probably still had like a couple children in his 50s and
Oh
60s,
yeah.
you know, if he wanted to inseminate a woman, right? There really
Yeah.
isn't that like same standard for men, at least that I know of. I'd be interested to see if the older you are, the more AIDS or not AIDS, sorry, autism prone your sperm or whatever could be. I don't know for that one. I'd be interested to read about it though. But I
Yeah.
do know obviously for women it's not
Cut
only
out. You cut out.
sorry. I do know for women it's obviously not just having your child be less prone to autism and other kinds of autoimmune diseases, but just your actual body itself. Like you're
You're
literally
being
having
able to
a
handle.
child coming out of your
Yeah.
vagina. So
The man part of that is not very
you have something come out
physically
of
capable.
yeah, you
Yeah,
have
no,
something
dude.
come out of the head, which you do every day when you piss. So not really much of a change.
Yeah, and that's basically it for the process on your end.
Hmm.
Not having to carry around a living being for
Hmm.
9 months. It's
Exactly.
getting bigger. Yeah.
That's how they get attached to the baby and stuff like that. You know, it kind of goes full circle, I guess.
Oh yeah, because they feel the baby kicking and stuff like that. Let's see. Does
Yeah, I know
anyone?
most people that I've heard that have had kids at like, 18, 20, 19, 20, 21, they say it does change your life, obviously. It reroutes it, it's a completely different lifestyle. But they end up like, saying it's great. It's never really like, I don't know if it's just because they're saying it because it's up front. They don't want to be like, oh yeah, it's fucking horrible.
Imagine.
You get that one parent that's just like, yeah, this shit's terrible, dude. Don't do it.
Like the
I
worst
don't
thing
know
ever.
if I don't know if people are trying to rationalize it for themselves, or if they're just, or if it's true. I mean, I don't know why you would lie, but I mean, it seems like most people are content with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably like
Over
yeah, at the
exaggeration.
beginning it's probably like, much different and they have to get used to it. But after a period of time they probably just get the hang of it and it's like cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, what is it? Is that Milo that says you're like participating in one of the great wonders of life?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it was my,
Weird.
yeah.
Like I have friends that have kids and it's like interesting, seeing them grow up and stuff like that and it's weird, but cool. That's cool. I mean, I don't have kids. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, I think most people really do kind of just get the hang of it. Probably just they panic a little bit at the beginning, find out, but then they kind of just I just for it, I suppose.
Yeah. Is there anywhere else we wanted to reroute this conversation?